Hello and welcome, cool cats and groovy chicks. We just got back from Florida, played a little wedding gig down there, and there was an intermission pianist, and he was, on his breaks, he was getting a little sauced, got a little tipsy, and there was a swimming pool, and he slipped and fell into the pool, and he's yelling out, "Help, I can't swim." Well, there was a guy sitting in a chair, and he yelled back to him, "Well, I can't play the piano, but you don't see me complaining." Well, we got a chuckle out of that. So now I'm going to show you some things about rootless voicings in the right hand and some bass lines in the left hand. So here we go now with bass lines and rootless voicings. This is the song called Sweet and Lovely. It's an old standard written by Gus Arnheim and Tobias. And I'm just going to play this song for you once through so you get an idea of the melody first if you haven't heard this song. Before I do the actual comping technique, I'm just going to play the song for you like this. I'm going to start out with a vamp like G minor 7 to C7 like this. Okay, now I'm going to get into the chord voicings in the right hand if I'm accompanying someone who's playing this song and I want to play bass lines. In other words, maybe there's no bass player or it's just a duo and you're playing with a guitarist or you're playing with a sax or a singer and you want to support them with a bass line and you want to play nice voicings or good voicings. And I want to mention that I'm just doing this off the top of my head. There's no script, there's no chart other than I'm using a lead sheet, but you can download this lead sheet, and I recommend you would do that on my website. There's no charge for that. So the first chord is G minor 7 to C7. So now I'm going to be using probably the third inversion in the right hand. Now, there's a G minor 7 in root position. So we go up to the third inversion. You're going to like move up, always taking the bottom note and putting on top, and then taking the bottom note, putting it on top, taking that note. So that's the third inversion. Now if I take it down an octave, it's there. So now usually what I do with this is I drop the root and add the ninth. That's the rule. It's like you go to whatever inversion you want to use. In this case I want to use the third inversion, and so the rule is drop the root, add the ninth. That gives it more color. And I've got the root here in the bass anyway, so I don't need it. Or if you're playing this like this with a bass player and then you're playing in your left hand and you're playing melody here, you don't need that root in there. You want the color tone of the ninth. So how do we know it's the ninth? Well, it's always one step above the root, but an octave, of course, higher. So you could call that the 2. I'm calling it the ninth because there's the 7th. There's the flatted 7th or the minor 7th interval from the bottom there, and there's the ninth. So now you have the G minor there. Now it's easy to move from there to the C7 by just moving there. So that's the combination of the two chords that in that position. Now you can play them in this position, you can play them in this position, you can play them in this position here. I mean, there's a multitude, but usually I like the third inversion, which is this one, or the first inversion, which is there. So it's the same chord. There it is in third inversion. Here it is in root position. Here it is in, in first inversion. Here it is in second inversion. I'm using this one here. I like that one, but I could use that one too. So usually the most important or the favored ones are the third inversion and the first inversion. Now, of course, what happens when I go from the G minor 7 to the C, that's really a C7 with an added ninth, and it has a 13th in it. I'm going from a third inversion here to a first inversion of a C C9 chord or C13 chord. How do I know that? Well, in the first inversion, the third is always on the bottom. You might want to look at this. Might be a little complicated if you're new at this, but like the third inversion always has the seventh, or the flatted seventh in this case, the minor seventh, on the bottom. And the first inversion always has the third on the bottom, whether it be major or minor. So there's my voicings for this. Now these are the first four measures. Now G minor 7 for one measure, C7 for one measure, G minor 7, C7 for one measure, like this. So I can play bass lines like this. That's very simple now. I end up on an F7 there. Now what am I doing? I'm playing right up the scale-wise, but then I need a connecting note. I don't want to get to the C before it hits, so 2, 3, so I'm going to put that in there, either the chromatic approach to the note, or I can go above it like this. I usually won't do that. I usually go what I call a chord tone above, or one step above in the scale. So we're approaching, you may say, well, how do you approach which that's part of the G minor scale, so I'm using that note in the scale, but it's above the target tone, so I want to hit the target tone on 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now I need to get to that G again on beat 1, so now I need to add a chromatic note. Now that's one of the keys to playing a good walking bass line. This is a walking bass line. Now I can also play a 2-beat bass line like this. 1, 2. That's a 2-beat. That's a 2-beat bass line. I'm playing mostly a 4-beat bass line like it. That means that it's a walking bass line, that there's a note for every quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So that's up the scale and then down the scale. Now when we go down the scale, I have to go down the scale, the C7 scale now. I'm on the C7 chord, so down the C7 scale now. If I go there on the 4th beat, I've hit the G too soon, so I add the chromatic note. Now you could do this sort of thing. That wouldn't be too bad. I prefer this. And use the chromatic note here, like that. So here's the bass line for the first 2 measures. Or like. Now I can vary it like this. No, I'm sorry. Like that. So now improvising this sort of thing is interesting, but you can only get to that level once you understand the rules and you get very comfortable with this. I've played bass lines for a long time. Down in Florida, I had to play bass lines all the time because they wouldn't hire a bass player. They would only hire like a drummer and a saxophone and a singer. So it was me playing bass lines. And a lot of these, if you have these keyboards that have the bass, you can split them here and have the piano up here, and you can have the bass down here. You can get a nice authentic sounding bass. Sorry, bass players, but that's how it goes. Now we'll continue from there. So I want to remind you that I'm doing this off the top of my head. I don't have a score. I have a lead sheet, but I don't have a score. I don't have everything written out. I don't have the bass line written out. It's like you're in my living room and I'm just showing you things that I know. And so now we get to, like, we've done this G minor 7, C7 thing. Now we get to the F7 there. Now, if I'm using the G minor 7 in this and the C7 in this position, then I'm going to go to the F7 probably here. But if I'm using it in the first inversion like this, G minor 7 to a C7 there, the G minor 7 now is in first inversion, and the C7 now is in third inversion. So I will go to the first inversion of the F7 chord, which I'm adding a 13th in there. So you say, well, how do you get the 13th? Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but an octave above that would be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's really an F7 with a 13th added there. And it's already in the chord because we put it here. Put it there, it's there with the G minor 9, it's there with the C7 or the C9, and so we keep it with the F13. F7 13. So like that's a good rule, is to always keep common tones in the chord and just move where you have to move. In other words, just slight movements. Economy of motion, I'll call it. That's a real big, that's a very important thing in understanding the rootless voicings and how to move what we call the economy of motion and voice leading, we call it. G minor 9 to C 13. And like, I like to do a lot of chromatic things like within that. Like I might go G minor 9 there and then C 9 with a augmented fifth there, or flat 13 if you want to call it that, and then go down to the F9 there. So I have chromatic movement on the top. Then sometimes I'll go there and put some tension in that F7 with a flat 9 there, an augmented fifth to get me to the B flat like that. So here's a whole thing. G minor 9, C7 or C9, sharp 5 takes me down to F9 with a 13 in it, to an F7, flat 9, sharp 5 to a B flat, major 7, voice leading, economy of motion, nice, smooth. This is all about jazz now. That's the progression of the voicings, not rhythmically, but let's put it into context. Okay, so G minor 9, C13 or C9, G minor 9, C13 with a sharp 5, F9, flat 9, F9, flat 9, B flat major 9, E flat 9. Okay, trying to call them out and play them at the same time, not easy. Try it. So we'll continue. If you were like hanging out with me in my living room, we would have an hour for your lesson. And so I charge $50 for an hour, and mechanics charge me $90 an hour to fix my car. So, and I have to travel all the time. Fortunately, the gas prices are down now. But anyway, that takes us to the last section of the A section, we'll call it. And we got a B flat major there, or you can play it as a B flat dominant if you like a 13 to an E flat. And you don't need the E flat, and the last part of it is interesting. It goes 1 to 5 to 1, so it goes. So that's a C major 7 to a G7 with a flat 9, like, and then that's an interesting thing about this tune. So F7, B flat major, E flat, and then C major. Okay, so if you're not hip to this tune, download it from my website and check it out. Very interesting. So now we'll go to the bridge. That's the next section. But just to try to put the bass line now, let's put it for the first 8 measures. Let's do that. Chords, let's do it. Switching now to F7. Okay, I realize you couldn't see the left hand there, so I'm going to put it up higher. So now, this takes some getting used to and playing a lot, experimenting with it, but I'm going to write this out for you as well. I'm going to write out a bass line that you can study. That's one thing I will do later on after this, to show you how to use these, what I would call walking bass lines within a chord structure. So now we'll continue. Continuing now, the Sweet and Lovely tune. It's an interesting tune because it's very simple and yet it's complex. So it's got both elements. Now, the complex part of it is, like, when you get to the bridge, it's a little bit unorthodox. It starts on the 4-chord minor. Now, we're in the key of C, right? So, like, F minor doesn't belong in the key of C, and it goes F minor, B flat, but that doesn't resolve the way it would normally would. If that was a 2-5-1, it would resolve to E flat, but it resolves back to C major. So that's unusual to begin with. It goes like this. See, like you would think he might have written it like this. That'd be more natural, maybe harmonically, but he goes like this. It sounds perfectly correct. He repeats that now. So, yeah. Now, here's the tricky thing. He plays the same melody, but transposed up to A flat minor, like up a minor third, like B da 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 da. Same concept, da da da. So that's A flat minor, D D D flat 9, da 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 da, E flat major 7 now, E flat minor 7, da da da. Then all he has to do is go take the same line and go down a half step, and he's back into the key of C, da da da. So he ended up in E flat major. Make it minor now, 2-5, chromatic 2 5s like that. So now let's continue now with the accompaniment of the voicings and the comping. And the one advantage of working with a script is I don't screw up as much, and then I don't have to keep repeating myself and do something 20 times. But anyway, like the bridge now is the F minor to the B flat to the C major 7. So now what's the most comfortable way to play that? Let's go in the bass line now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's the obvious, right? 1. The root, the 5th. I could even put an 8th note in there, like ba, 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 I'm gonna go, and then approach the C like that. Or I could go above the C, like ba, 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 because that note is in the B flat scale. See, so you're always following certain rules that involve the scale of the whatever chord you're playing at that moment. Like, so it's always the chord, not the chord you're approaching, but the chord you're on at that time. But then the approach chord has to be work as well, like that. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, like that, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now from here I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, back to the F minor like that. I could do like something like this too. I could go, I don't know if you can see that. Let's try that again. I could do something like this. I could go. That's a different way to do it, like 1 and 2. Now you might say, well, you don't have the root there, which is true. I don't have the root, but I have the third. Israel Crosby was a master of this on the bass. He would play like notes that weren't the root of the chord, but would create a nice melodic line, like 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe like that. Or like, well, not that one. Let's see. Like there it is. There it is. You see that? Same thing there. What am I doing? This is just natural for me to play those notes. I hear them. A lot of it is developing your ear. You know, you hear when you're playing a bad note and you hear when you're playing a good note. So it's always, the note needs to be within the scale of the chord you're playing. It doesn't always have to be the root, but it should be a strong, if it isn't the root, it should be like a third or a fifth or some other note that is strong. Not always. There's always exceptions. Once you learn the rules, then you can break them. So like from the A flat minor now, I might go like this. Back to the E. Now we'll take it from there. Now here's an important issue, taking this bass line. The melody is, so if say a singer's singing that note, you don't necessarily want to play this voicing. You want to play, that'd be be like with the 9 in it. You see, that's a tricky thing when you're voicing and you've learned these voicings, and then there's a singer singing and they have to sing that note and you're playing that note right next to them. Or it's clashing. So like a lot of times I like to support the singer's note by knowing what the melody is. And if you're looking at the melody, you should always, if you're reading a singer's score, you should always have the melody in there so you know how to support the singer. So I might use this voicing like that to there. So like this. That will support the melody line. Or I could do it down here. Well, that's kind of low, so I might do it here. Like that. That doesn't interfere with the melody. It's like... But if you want to support the melody, then you're going to play it on the top. I want to do another tutorial where I talk about accompanying singers, but that's one of the things I would talk about, is how to enhance what the singer's doing by voicing the chord in such a way that it supports that melody line. So like da 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 da. So like I play the chords like this. That supports the melody line, like. So now the chords. Now it goes to here. Same thing then. I might play the chord like that, or I could play it like this. I wouldn't probably play it like that because that's too close to the melody note. Like that. Probably like that. There. Or I could play it. A lot of times it's, now on this one I can use the third inversion because it's high enough. See there? The third inversion is too low here on the F minor, B flat, C major. But here on the A flat minor, it gets into that range where it sounds good in the third inversion. Like that. So these preferred chords, these rootless chords, have advantages in certain positions and disadvantages based on where they're falling on the keyboard and how they sound and how they support the melody line. So like, you know, in the first instance of the bridge, I'm using probably that one or this one. And then on the second one, I can go down here to the third inversion. I know this is complicated, but you can learn a lot more about this by looking at my book. But I don't want to take an hour for this video, so I'm going through it rather quickly. And now we'll continue. Okay, we're getting lengthy here, so I want to make this the last segment. The main thing I want to talk about is the voicings, the rootless voicings. And I talked about how you take the root position and you invert it and add the ninth. So like here we add the ninth on the G minor 7 and so on. And that rule applies all the way through on the F minor 7. Now, the voicing needs to support the melody. That's another thing I talked about. So on the bridge, I can't just necessarily use that F minor in that voicing because the melody is, I have an A flat and the melody is going to clash with that melody. Now, I might adjust the voicing to support the melody. Maybe like that. Now, with a dominant 7th chord, you can always add a color tone, most of the time. So on this one, I'm going to add the flat 9, like that, okay? Same thing here. There I'm adding the flat 9. Flat 9 there, and they sound really good. It's really a primo jazz chord sound to add the flat 9, even though it says 9 on the wants that chord. That flat 9 sounds nice there. If you like it, it takes getting used to the flat 9. Getting used to that very dissonant sound because there's that. So now let's play a bass line through that bridge section and listen to it. Here we go. ask me, what am I? I'm putting a grace note in there. Putting a grace note in. Actually, you have a lot of liberties with this. You can play a lot of bad notes and they don't sound so bad because you're moving to a good note. You know, and the very next bass note is a really good note that fits the chord. One other thing I should point out is, like right here at the end, E flat minor, I do use chromatic approaches like this. That's very important to use those. Important thing to understand is you can use a chromatic approach to the tone, like E flat minor to A flat would be like, or like D minor. I might not use it the first time, but the second time I might, like this. Right there, I want it. I want that A flat in there. It clashes, but it's a nice tension pulled to the next root, because we're going right there to. We're actually going to end up on a G. Now that's a good question because we have a G7. I would just and then I would go down to the lower one, like, and I put that in and go to the lower G. Okay, so that's a lot to take in one, and I probably went too fast, but let's just continue now and sort of wrap things up with some general rules, okay? Here we go. For this last segment, I just want to say, to understand bass lines in detail, you might want to check out my book, which talks about the various rules, such as stepwise in the scale, such as chromatic approaches, like that, such as octave and fifths, and also the double notes, such as, like, you know, like when you're moving, say, in descending or ascending motion, and you might have something like this, you know, or like double notes, and then random combinations, like going up a sixth, down a whole step, down a third, down a half step, up a third, those kind of random combinations. But anyway, if you take a look at my book, and you will also look at the rules that I talk about, I've had other videos on this, and study this chart. Go to my website. It's free. All this music is free. You don't have to pay anything for the music I put on my website. And you can watch these videos. You can slow them down. So they've told me there are programs that will slow these down. And you can watch this and ask me a question. Send me your comments and questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. And if you have a special request, I'll try to address that. So thanks so much for watching. And we'll wrap up now. Thanks. Bye-bye. That's all for now, hipsters and flipsters. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And please write to me, send me your comments, your questions, and so on. And until next time, I want to say, in the words of my famous friend, Hermie Dressel, God rest his soul, swing loose.